Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to another session of the Learning Days organized by the Swiss NGO DRR platform. Throughout 3 days, we are exchanging, learning, and discussing good practices and opportunities for NGOs in using and implementing weather, water, and climate services. My name is Johanna Zwalen, and I will be the one leading you through this session. Omar Beltrat, who supports me in moderating and managing the chat, and I look very much forward to this next upcoming 1 hour and a half. Our session has the focus on how to strengthen the capacities of national services and how NGOs could play a role to support that. Entry points for contribution and successful joint cooperation from global to national to local will be the heart of this session's inputs and discussion. The learning days, including this session here, are organized by the Swiss NGO DRR platform. For those of you who are not yet familiar with it, I would like to give a short introduction to the platform. The platform is a network of Swiss-based organizations working on a not-for-profit basis. It was founded 2011 and has since then increased its membership to almost 20 member organizations. The platform is dedicated to increase the resilience of women and men, communities, and government by fostering learning and exchange, providing conceptual support, and engaging in advocacy and policy dialogue. Since 2020, a working group on weather, water, and climate services is active. And thanks to this working group, we are now here today to learn and discuss frameworks and opportunities for cooperation between stakeholders to improve weather, water, climate services. Before we start, I would like to share a few technical information and would like to start to say that please keep your mic closed if you're not speaking, but please turn on your camera if your internet allows so that we can also see who's with us and participating in this session. As well, I would like to ask you to rename yourself if necessary and add your name as well as your organization. We try to make this session here as interactive as possible, which means that I would like to ask you to add your questions anytime in the chat and also raise your hand in case you have some questions. We have people participating who speak French and Spanish, and for this reason I would like to make emphasis on the fact that the session is translated in those 2 languages. If you need translation, then please go to the icon interpretation in the toolbar and choose your language. Last but not least, I would like to say that all sessions are recorded. They will be made available on our YouTube channel, which you can easily access through our website. With all that technical information said, I suggest that we now come to the topic. We called our session from global to national. Why this? Well, because we aim to discover existing from global to regional to national and to local. We aim to understand what those frameworks and initiatives aim for and how they work. We also aim to learn about possible entry points for contribution and cooperation for NGOs from the perspective of different stakeholders, and we aim to discuss lessons learned and recommendations. Our first speaker today will be Ilaria Gallo from the World Meteorological Organizations. She will introduce you to the role of WMO and present global initiatives and frameworks. Our second speaker will be Andrea Rosa from the Swiss National Meteorological Service called MediaSwiss. He will share experiences related to cooperation between national hydromet services. For the third inputs, we have Grover Mamani and Orlando Chura from the NGO Helvetas Bolivia. They will share experiences in strengthening interinstitutional governance mechanisms at national and local level. And as said before, we aim for an interactive session. So please don't hesitate to add your questions anytime in the chat and raise your hand for discussion. To check whether the chat is working, I would actually like to start with a first question for you all and would like to ask you, which global frameworks and initiatives do you already know? I will add this to the chat so we can see if it works. I can see that people are already sharing. Early warning for all is initiative shared. Does any other global initiative or framework come to mind? Or have you been even involved in one? If you would like to share an answer, please do that in the chat. If you like, you can continue to add that in the chat. But in the meantime, I will already start to introduce our first speaker. I can see there is Ari from Nepal adding to the chat. If others would like to add, please do so. But in the meantime, I will already start to introduce our first speaker, Ilaria. Ilaria works in the World Meteorological Organization since 2017. In her role as scientific officer in the climate service branch, she managed the development of scientific methodologies, technical resources, and country capacities, as well as she supports WMO's contribution to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Ilaria, I let you now share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Let me try first to do all the technical procedures. So sharing my screen. Right. No, I think I'm not. Can you see presentation? The slides?
Yes, now we can see your presentation.
Okay. Excellent. Just a moment. Can I start? Thank you very much.
We still see it in presentation mode.
The floor is yours.
Could you maybe change it to on the three dots underneath the slide? Could you hide the presenter's view, please?
Yeah, let me try again. Okay, just a moment. So, share screen.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, and
We see it in full screen. That's perfect. Thank you.
And now, do you also see
Still.
it?
Still
Okay,
full
yeah.
screen. All great. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, well, good day, good afternoon, good morning. I know you are kind of connected from different parts of the world. I will try to speak slowly because I know that there are kind of interpretation services. So please kind of excuse me if I speak slowly, but it's for the benefit of everybody. So first of all, thank you very much, Joanna, for this nice introduction. I would like to repeat my name just in case. My name is Ilaria Gallo, and I work in the WMO Secretariat. We are based in Geneva, in Switzerland, and I work in the Climate Service branch. First of all, let me thank you, the Swiss NGO DRR platform, for really providing this opportunity, this chance for WMO to present on the role of WMO and as well as of the national hydromet agencies in early warning and climate services. So today, I will be the one delivering this presentation, but please bear in mind that all the information I will provide you has been really compiled and produced by a team of experts, of scientific officers from different branches of WMO, not only climate services, where I belong to, but also early warning, infrastructure department, and other initiatives that I will present today. And the names are just listed on this cover slide. So let's look at the content, and I hope you can see the second slide. So first, I will give a kind of a historical background of WMO, because maybe some of you are not familiar with the organization, and also how this links to the national services for providing early warning and climate services at the national level. Secondly, I'll give you some examples of potential partnerships with multilateral institutions, as well as a working example of collaboration with NGOs, because this may be of your interest, and we can reflect together how we can scale this up. And finally, we really can reflect together through question and answers and brainstorming about the forward-looking opportunities for joint work between WMO and NGOs. So basically connecting the global level to the national and subnational scales. So coming back to the historical overview. WMO finds its roots in the International Meteorological Organization, in short, IMO. That was established, imagine, in 1873, so long time ago. IMO was also an NGO. And the main scope, the main objective was really the development of meteorology and hydrology, the science and the services through international cooperation. And the idea at the foundation of IMO is that basically the weather cycle, the climate, water resources are all connected. There is just one system, and this requires international cooperation at a global scale in order to reap the societal benefits. So because of this important role, IMO was transformed into a specialized UN agency in 1951, so after the World Wars. And WMO there was given the mandate by the UN to be the authoritative voice on the state and behavior of Earth atmospheres, but not just atmospheres, also its interactions with the land, with the oceans, with the water cycles. And this is why currently WMO advocates for the so-called Earth system approach that really looks at all these elements in a joint way. And basically, WMO provides the framework of this international cooperation for about 193 member states. And these member states of WMO are represented by the national meteorological and hydrological services that, as you know, they contribute to the safety and wellness, welfare of society. I will give you just a couple of examples of this cooperation framework, how it works. For example, WMO works through the World Meteorological Congress, which is an assembly of the member states, and they take decisions, they take resolutions. So in that way, for example, WMO regulates and facilitates the free and unrestricted exchange of climate data and information. But also WMO is a standard-setting organization. This means that WMO, through decisions and resolution of the Congress, can really set specific standards in terms of climate, weather, and water data and information, and can enforce them at the national level and also at the regional level through, for example, the activity of the regional climate centers. So let's come to WMO at present. So we have seen by the history that WMO has been mandated by the UN to provide really world leadership and guidance and expertise in the delivery and application of science-based climate and hydrological science and services. More recently, WMO has been kind of playing a more leading role in the international efforts to monitor the global climate and to protect the environment. So, for example, nowadays we are very active working with several UN agencies and, of course, also the NMHSs to support the implementation of the UNFCCC, what John mentioned before, the Paris Agreement and the Sendai framework for DRR. These are all global overarching frameworks for protecting the environment. And this, you can see it from the current strategic plan, which covers 2024-2027, but actually arrives up to 2030. So this is really the plan for our future. And the big priority, the vision, is really to build the resiliency of societies in face of climate change and extreme weather and water events, and really to catalyze policy action, not only on adaptation and resilience, but also in terms of mitigation, emission reduction. And at the same time, the strategic plan builds on the result-based management approach and concept. As many of you work on projects, you are familiar with this approach. Basically, we wish to translate the vision, the strategies into specific actions, projects, outputs, milestones. And this is very important, for the project implementation, for the monitoring and evaluation, etc. But if you're interested, for example, in collaborating with WMO, it's very important that there is an alignment in terms of the strategic views, vision and plan for the future. And I'm sure we are all on the same page in that regard. So going closer to the plan and to the objectives, I'll just highlight it here a couple of ones that could be relevant for a joint work, WMO NGOs. And these objectives are kind of driven by the international landscape and some kind of directions that we are all taking as a global community. First of all, as you know, the global agenda is kind of creating a huge demand for actionable, accessible, and authoritative science-based information for policy action. Again, think about Sendai framework, Paris Agreement. At the same time, we also see an increasing threat of extreme weather events and climate change that really urge action, policy action at different levels for resilience, mitigation, and adaptation. At the same time, there is also the same extreme events that really threaten the capacity gaps in several countries, the global infrastructures, the service delivery. Think about the COVID-19 pandemic, how it affected the operational side of the med services, for example, at the national level. At the same time, there are also some opportunities we can reap. For example, the advancements in science, in technology, with the artificial intelligence, working with the big data, with the satellite information. So there is really need to forge innovative partnership with the private sector, but as well as, for example, for all those working at the ground level, like for example, the NGOs. So with this map, I want to give you kind of a sense of where WMO works. As we said, it's a global organization, but we also do work at the regional and the national country level. This map is kind of updated at May 2023, but it's still kind of reliable. You can take it into consideration and shows the distribution of WMO work and projects. And there are two kind of shaded areas. The blue ones, which highlights the project done under EW for all, early warnings for all, that I will describe later, and the green ones, which are all other projects. So all together can give you a good sense of where we work. And you can see the striking kind of vision is that most of our work is really concentrated in the most weather and climate sensitive region, so Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin American and Caribbean. And at the moment, we don't have yet a publicly available project repository that you can consult, but I put this link to the EW4All dashboard. This already gives a good sense of where we work. If you want to know more about where we work in a specific country, because maybe you want to establish connection, discuss about collaboration, you can contact us directly. And so in general, in total, we have 43 active projects in 134 countries, so covering most of these 193 total member states, with a project envelope of about 122 Swiss francs million. And these are the different kind of flagship initiatives, and this helps to respond to Joanna's question and global framework, let's say, and also different types of projects that WMO implements. So WMO, for example, can be a direct implementer of a project, for example, through the funds of the Adaptation Fund, the World Bank, the EU. Or we provide direct technical assistance to member states, for example, to the NMHSs. If they need support on specific aspects, we are ready to jump in. Of course, we also need some financial support. This is usually provided again by big players like the World Bank or the African Development Bank or other banks. And then we also provide the technical advisory services on specific kind of areas for, again, big players like the Green Climate Fund, the World Bank, and the multilateral development banks. In terms of the flagship initiatives, now I talk about CRUISE and SOF, and later on about EW4All. So for CRUISE, this is an acronym for Climate Risk and Early Warning Systems Initiative. It's a specialized fund. So it's a fund that collects different member state pledges and donations, and really aims to build strong and people-centered early warning systems, especially in developing countries, in LDCs and small island developing states. And one of the most important aspects of CRUISE is that it tries to harmonize climate financing support. So it also works with the Green Climate Fund, for example. For EW4All, as I said, I will explain in the next slide. And for SOF, this is another kind of global initiative. SOF is an acronym for Systematic Observation Financing Facility. It was launched in 2022. It is also a fund. So again, it collects contribution from different members. And it provides a grant financing, again, like CRUISE, and peer-to-peer technical assistance. But this is focusing on the collection and exchange of weather and climate data, those that are collected through the stations, so surface-based data. And also make sure that this data is collected according to WMO standards. As I told you before, WMO is a standard setting organization. And the standard for observation is called GBON, so another acronym. And really, the ultimate goal of SOF is to make sure that the climate scenarios that use, for example, models and computed systems are kind of coupled by long-term observation data. And these are very important to understand the extreme events, the history of the trends in the past, and also how to better project them in the future. And also, of course, to understand the current vulnerabilities. Another flagship initiative that I'm sure you know, most of you know, is it's EW4All. Even this one has been launched in 2022, like SOF, and really aims to achieve the universal coverage of EWS by all countries by 2027. So it's pretty a kind of ambitious goal. And also EW4All aims to reduce the impact of disasters and vulnerability on population. And really the assumption is just after the world countries have sufficient capacities really to respond and also to be alerted in good time to activate preventive responses. I'm sure you are all familiar with the DRR kind of cycle, because this is kind of I'm sure the field of your expertise. So I will just maybe give you some hint of the WMO support, so the specific WMO viewpoints in EW4All. So EW for All is structured around 4 pillars that kind of reflect the early warning value chain: the risk knowledge and management, the observation and forecasting, dissemination and communication of risk knowledge, and preparedness and response. So for pillar 1 and 2, WMO is particularly active because we contribute to impact-based forecasting. And basically, we try to develop country capacities to apply forecasting techniques and really enhancing the localization and lead time of warnings. And I mean, this really works, as I told you, working on the collection of reliable observed data, as well as coupling with models and coupling as well with all the socioeconomic data on vulnerabilities. So to have really a full picture of the country's vulnerabilities. Pillar 3, it's about communication, and this is important for WMO because, as you know, we set the so-called standards of common alerting protocols. This really allows to deliver effective and standardized messages and alerting. And then pillar 4, it's about preparedness and response. So again, this strongly builds on, for example, defining trigger threshold for anticipatory action, all based on the impact scenarios that have been developed under the first 2 pillars. But, you know, I don't want to spend much time because I know you already had session on these value chains. So I'll give you just an update on EW for All. This year, the initiative has made significant progress, with 23 countries having held national events and 40 more as planned for 2024, for this year, basically, sorry. And they plan to have to develop national roadmaps for EW for All, for early warning systems. But the most important aspect is that at COP29, so the one that is coming in November in Azerbaijan, we will try to link EW for All with the UNFCCC agenda. So basically, for example, with the global goal on adaptation, with the climate finance, with the national determined contributions. Now, this is another global initiative that I don't know you're familiar with. This looks more at the climate services. And it's called the Global Framework for Climate Services. It's a multi-government and multi-stakeholder platform, basically. Has been launched in 2012, so almost more than 10 years ago. And really, the big aim is to support and coordinate the development, delivery, and use of climate services for policy and decision-making. And really gathers together international cooperation, donors, governments, NGOs as well. And it's structured around 5 pillars, 5 components that are also the key components of the climate service value chain that I know that you have been exposed yesterday. So the climate observation and monitoring, the research, the modeling, prediction and projection, so also looking at the future, the climate service information system that links the global scale with the regional level and the national and subnational levels, the user interface platform. And GFCS also focuses on the priority sectors for vulnerable countries like agri and food, water, health, DRR, and energy. So as I told you, GFCS was launched more than 10 years ago. So basically in 2022, it really emerged the need to revamp, to refocus, to relaunch the framework. And there has been a resolution of a WMO Congress to basically revamp GFCS and reworking it around new areas. So we call it GFCS refocused. So you can read them here. These are very kind of pertinent, very kind of, they speak to the current issues. For example, strengthening the climate services capacities, supporting climate science for climate action, policy and finance, keep developing standards for climate services, and really improve national coordination on climate services. And the idea at the basis of this revamping is that there is really need to address the developing countries' needs, especially to enable them to provide use essential climate services. So I'll give you 2 examples about this new revamped GFCS. One of the priority is to make sure that all countries establish national framework for climate services. These are kind of coordination platforms, mechanisms that enable different actors and institutions really to come together, to collaborate, and for the co-design and co-production of climate services. NFCS, they also have other important roles. For example, they help to identify what are the gaps and needs and priorities at the national level, and also to establish legal frameworks that are really approved by the Cabinet of the Presidents, by laws at the international level. So they really make it as a sustainable, long-term, and fully national endorsed process and mechanism. In this map, you see the countries that are different stages in the NFCS processes. The purple ones are the ones that they just started, the roadmap, let's say the process. The green ones, they are the ones at the kind of middle stage, and the blue ones are the ones that are really adopted the NFCS with a national law. Through a national law. I know that the time is almost done, so I will be brief in the final slides. This is another example of a partnership with the Green Climate Fund. For this slide, I just ask you, if you want to develop a project and you want to work on climate science and services, you really need to look at this guidance. We have developed it with the Green Climate Fund, and really helps to design projects that really kind of address climate science information needs and services. And has been done with the Green Climate Fund. So really with the aim, with the idea that if you follow up this kind of process and step, you will be able to access this international funding facility. So thinking about the challenges and opportunities for collaboration with NGOs, well, the biggest challenges, I might say, is really to link up this value chain from producers of climate science information and users. The challenges are related really to effective interdisciplinarity and stakeholder collaboration and sectoral, and really blending, the knowledge that is produced at the global level by the regional centers and by the sector-specific users and the local communities. I'll give you this example and then we can close. This is actually an example of WMO working with an NGO. The NGO is called People in Need, and it's based they work all over the world, and they are from Czech Republic. So WMO works with the people in need in Southeast Asia, specifically in Laos and Cambodia. In these two countries, they originally had a flood early warning system, which is called 1294, which is the number that you need to dial if you want to receive the alerts in terms of flood events. So the system is based on basic sensors that monitor the water level across the country. And these sensors has been kind of installed and also monitored by local communities through the technical support of people in need, and also the provincial officers of the NMHS. So WMO, how he managed to enter into the picture, because he was asked to scale up this system. And basically, WMO also made the link. Of course, we accepted the idea, the request for support, and we also complemented the fund. Originally was funded by the Swiss Development Corporation, and then we linked that with the cruise, with the initiative I explained before, to scale up this sensor system. But at the same time, the role of communities and the provincial NMHS was kept central. So the community still had a big role in doing that, in scaling up this project. And also another added value from WMO is that we linked the system to NMHS in a way that was really kind of trickle down of alerting system and participation. And I think from this kind of short project, we can distill some lessons learned. So the project really showed a good way to engage local knowledge holders to support impact-based forecasting. So really building national capacities with NMHS as well as local capacities. It also shows a good example of co-production and co-design of early warning and climate services, because different kind of sector of the population were involved: the disaster management officers, the local communities representatives, the district officers. And also, of course, it really fostered cross-regional learning, because it involved Laos and Cambodia and the whole region, those countries. And to conclude with my last slide, I think here I really wanted to highlight the kind of the key aspect I see, especially from a WMO perspective, where we could work, we could explore as a global organization, of course, through the national members and NGOs. We really need to co-explore users' needs and requirements. We still kind of struggle as a WMO to go down to the local level, including the socioeconomic vulnerability data, because we mainly work with the climate data, but we also need the non-climatic data for specific sectors, societal groups like women, children, disabled people, indigenous communities, really to make sure we can co-produce climate science information and services. And we really need to strengthen the engagement and the presence of user communities in all these processes, and FCS, and as well as at the subnational level. And also more research is needed to link the physical hazards. WMO is pretty strong with that because we work with the global centers like UK Met Office, NOAA, and others, but we really need to connect with the local impacts at the local level. And the ultimate goal is really to make design tools and support that really can lead to transformative adaptation and to resilience. And for this, I think we really need this connection with the local context with the NGOs. And this is my email address. Of course, if you have any question, we can interact now. Otherwise, if you want to know more about the project or the initiative, you can please feel free to contact me whenever you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. Thank you for this very, very good overview. And it was very interesting to hear about different initiatives and framework. And I think also very inspiring to see how WMO sees opportunities to collaborate with NGOs. I think we have some time, so I would like to invite the audience to share questions or inputs if there are. Are there any questions from the audience for Ilaria? Yes, Mark, please.
Hi, thanks Ilaria for the presentation, very insightful. One question I would have is, could you explain a bit the process of how did you get in touch with the NGO people in need for that example? For example, how is the process of like connecting with an NGO? Is it WMO that got in touch with people in need or the reverse way? I would be interested in the process, please. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. First of all, okay, let me give a premises that the information about this project I got, this is one of the info I got from my colleagues. So of course I read, but if you need a very, very specific mechanism, I can get in touch with my colleagues. But I can tell you that WMO already works. It was already working in Laos and Cambodia, because as I said, we have a cruise project currently since several years. So, and because we have a project, we have project teams, we have consultants, we have cruise focal points within the government, usually in the Met Office, also in the national disaster management authorities. So now, I cannot really tell you if it was WMO to approach PIN or PIN that approached WMO, but just to tell you that we have a presence. Of course, WMO doesn't have country offices as, for example, UNDP or FAO or WHO or UNICEF, but we have a very strong presence through the NMHSs. And this is the message I can give you, that if you are interested in establishing such sort of a cooperation frameworks collaboration, you can either come to WMO Secretariat, and we have all the dashboard of projects. We can put you in contact with the local level, or vice versa. You can get in touch with our member states, with the NMHSs. We are really kind of a visceral kind of connection with them. We really worked side by side, and so if you want to know the exact details, I can come back to you. But usually, we have a strong presence in all countries through different means, NMHSs, project officers, and we also, of course, go often on mission into these countries through workshops, events. So we have different ways to interact with the national and local actors and players.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I can see that Sergio has his hand raised. I invite you to share the question via chat. I suggest that we move on to the next speaker, but please share your question in the chat, and I'm sure that there is some time for interaction after the third input. With this, I would like to introduce Andrea, our second speaker. Andrea has broad experience in technical and coordinative activities in the Swiss National Weather Service called Meteo-Swiss. He represents Meteo-Swiss and Switzerland in committees of international organizations, and he will today present his experience related to project activities in the Andes. I can see that you are starting to share your screen. That's excellent. We can see it. Maybe you can make your slides bigger. All fine. We see it. You're still muted, Andrea.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Excellent.
Excellent. All
You
right.
could change back to the slides.
Yes. Okay. Can you see my slide?
All fine. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So the title is Developing Partnerships and Enhancing Capacities of National Hydromet Services in the Andes, experiences from the project Enandes Plus. And I'll tell you in a second what Enandes Plus is all about. So I just wanted to share you a piece of motivation. This is a recent El Nino event in Lima, Peru. And this is why hydromet services are very important. Oops. Climate is important, and Ilaria gave a broad overview already. We all know about the Paris Agreement. Mitigate climate change is a matter of politics, but strengthen the resilience and adapt to impacts of climate change and variability needs very strong national Met services. And as a matter of fact, places high demands on the national Met services through the national adaptation plans, for example. Now, I'm glad that Ilaria already talked about the GFCS, the Global Framework for Climate Services, with the priority sectors and the 5 pillars, one of which will be at the center of my presentation today, which conceptually is a very simple presentation and focuses on interaction with users. And so the GFCS concept for it is the user interface platform. I came across the Climb SA initiative. This is some sort of it's a European funding, almost 100 millions to get GFCS going in the African, Caribbean, and Pacific region. So user interface platform has been around for quite some time and gave rise to some divergent conceptions of what such a platform might be. It's not a website, but it's rather a structured, multifaceted exchange with users. So it's a forum, it's a platform, is an engagement with user to get to know the user, especially their vulnerabilities and the option for actions they have. Then co-design and user tailor services accordingly in the sectors, in all sectors that are sensitive and dependent of weather, water, and climate. Ensure effective communication channels, and the buzzword here is the last mile. And finally, and not least, is the training of all sorts of users to use weather, water, and climate information. So this is effectively the basis for early warnings and taking mitigating action. So a short outline, I'd like to mention the Swiss engagement in South America, give a short overview on the Enandes Plus project, mention the meteorological value chain, which is actually 360 degrees, so quite demanding. the socioeconomic benefits and the user engagement, which proved to be in projects that we did as absolutely pivotal to get the government's attention in countries where med services are not as established as we know it from Europe or even Switzerland. Okay, and close with a summary and the vision. So a short history of Inandis Plus. From 2012 to 2018, SDC has funded the Climandis initiative, which was a bilateral twinning project between Senami Peru, so the National Med Service of Peru, and Meteo Suisse. So we started off with a phase one where we tackled only education and training and technical meteorological capacities of the Met Service. And the phase two, then we recognized the importance of demonstrating the socioeconomic benefits and interacting and engaging with users. So we added this to the second phase. Inspired by Climandis, WMO submitted a very fine project to the Adaptation Fund, which now is not only targeting one country, but actually 3 countries, Chile, Colombia, Peru. And they target the full value chain and aim at demonstrating socioeconomic benefits in 3 sectors. Now, along came what we used to call Climandis Next, or the post-Climandis initiative, made it into a contribution to Enandes Plus, which basically is a contribution to Enandes of the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation, and added Argentina, Bolivia, Ecuador to the game, and with a particular focus of South-South cooperation, with the benefit of some Swiss coaching where necessary. Very important is to strengthen regional collaboration. We are currently in the first phase, which is in the process of spinning up. It's not an extremely rapid process, but we are getting there. And the second phase of other 4 years is planned. So this is quite a substantial perspective we have here. So, and Enandes Plus is the whole thing, the combination of the Adaptation Fund project and the SDC contribution to it. You may or may not have spotted the author list on the title slide. It said Andrea Rossa et multi alii, and it's really, we have 12 institutions, of which I basically mentioned the focal points, but there are many more people involved here. So it's actually a regional multi-donor, multi-partner challenge. The project structures, we have the 2 donors I mentioned, we have 6 countries, we have WMO that does the project coordination, one of the examples that Ilaria summarized, along with 4 WMO regional centers in South America. And Switzerland participates with Meteo Suisse, which is the National Med Service of Switzerland, along with the Bern University of Applied Science, and more specifically HAFL for the socioeconomic benefit aspects. I'm not going to go into this structure diagram, because it's really demanding getting the coordination over all the project partnership. Another aspect that brings complexity to the table is the value chain. It starts with, can you see my mouse? I hope so. It starts with data. You need meteorological data. You have to bring them in forms that allow you to interpret them, like for climate trends, for example, very demanding. then you need very specific education and training. You need trained professionals. You need to do products of all sorts, be it data products or long-term forecasting. Then you need to tailor products to the users. So you have a user interface that you need to have in order then to estimate or demonstrate the socioeconomic benefits of weather, water, and climate services. So this whole value chain is part of Enandis Plus, and today we are focusing on the user interface platform. Okay, the goals are fourfold overall. The goal is for Andean societies to be better adapted and more resilient to hydroclimatic hazards through improved weather, water, and climate services. And I'm not going through all the goals here, except for saying that they are of technical nature, institutional nature, socioeconomic nature, and human, and not least regional nature. So they're quite multidimensional goals we have to strive for. And as I said, institutional and socioeconomic aspects are most important for us today. And now let me go back to the Climandes project. There we did a couple of socioeconomic benefit studies. The first one was in the high mountain region of Cusco for two key crops in the agricultural sectors. One was coffee and the other was maize. And the study design and methodology, we did an econometric economic valuation based on a hypothetical early warning system for coffee and maize farmers. It included 60 in-depth interviews with smallholder farmers, allowing us to do a quantitative analysis. And here I'd like to focus that these interviews were facilitated by CARE, an NGO that was very familiar with this particular region in Peru. Okay. The main findings, and these are just numbers from some 10 years ago, are reported here. Let's just jump to the aggregated values. Over 10 years, we found out that such a targeted climate service or weather service was scaled up to Peru as a country in the order of $100 million over 10 years. And this is even a conservative estimation, making it clear that even modest investments in observation infrastructure and services through the National Met Service would easily be paid back by the benefits. A second study was still in the highlands, in the Altiplano, where we took a slightly different approach towards designing evidence-based climate services. This included, in a first step, putting together evidence for action, so stakeholder mappings, a socioeconomic evaluation, for which you need vulnerability assessment, socioeconomic benefits, risk preference, and more, and then translating this evidence into practice, addressing key constraints in the delivery, in the preparation and delivery of services, including farmer field schools to train users, and along with monitoring and evaluating how the services are actually received. Critical for all of this, you need an in-depth understanding of the interaction between the social, economic, political, environmental factors in the context of vulnerability towards adverse weather events of the particular populations and sectors, obviously.
Andrea,
So-
sorry to interrupt. Time is running.
Okay.
There are a few minutes left. But
Okay, thank you for. These are some of the main findings. I'm not going through all of them. One summarizing finding is that the engagement with the users improved considerably the perception of the population of the national Met service. So, and this goes from confidence in the service provision, the comprehension of the products, as well as sorting out access, timely access to information and services. So the main keyword here is all of this called for a participatory and community-based approach. Okay, let's move on. Conclusion. I'd like to highlight that the importance of the user dialogue. So there, we came to the conclusion it's not sufficient to have a Met service that thinks they know all about the user needs, because user needs are extremely sector specific. And so the user interface platform is really a seminal element of the global framework of climate services. And obviously, a well-equipped national Met service needs to be in place in order to be able to offer valuable and reliable climate and weather information. Summary. So Enandes Plus aims to strengthen NMHS capacities to deliver reliable weather, water, and climate services. It addresses the entire value chain, for which it relies on effective regional cooperation and promotes in particular South-South cooperation, has a strong focus on user engagement and demonstration of the socio-economic benefit, and offers potential fields for cooperation for NGOs of all sorts, and is a fruit of a long-term Swiss engagement in the Andean region. And let me just close with a vision. Enandes Plus catalyzes, so that's really our vision of this of this regional approach, that it catalyzes a collaborative network between the national Met services in South America, the benefits of which are recognized and, very important, adequately funded by its members. So thank you very much for your attention.
thank you, Andrea, for your presentation and for introducing us to approaches applied by Meteo Swiss. I can see that there is already a question from the audience. So Christina from Helvetas is saying, in other sessions, we discussed the importance of including local, traditional, indigenous observations and knowledge into weather, water, climate services. Co-creation from scratch. So the question here is, what is Climandes Enandes Plus' approach towards this?
Yes, we had this question and issue in the Climandes project, where we found that we, through the engagement with the user communities, we were able to improve the that's a difficult word, legitimacy of the science-based approach. So we brought the science-based forecasting approach to the table, whereas ancestral knowledge was brought to the table by local communities, and we had exchange in this on such platforms. And Tsunami Peru, they made a substantial publication, a book, in which they compiled all sorts of traditional knowledge for climate and weather predictions.
Interesting and great. think that was very helpful. Are there any other questions from the audience for Andrea? I invite the audience also to share questions in the chat. Someone is asking for the link to the publication. Maybe Andrea, you can share that in the chat.
Yeah.
I was also observing that there were some previous questions for Ilaria, which Ilaria has already responded in the chat. That's great. And others can still add. There could be some exchange in the chat, or we make sure that there is still some time at the very, very end of the session so that we can continue the discussion. But I think it's now time to invite our two last speakers. We have Grover, who has extensive experience in coordinating and implementing projects in Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, as well as his colleague Orlando, who's an aeronautic specialist with focus on meteorology, climatology, and agrometeorology. Both are connected from La Paz, Bolivia. Orlando, Grover, bienvenidos, and thanks a lot for getting up so early to join us in this session. I invite you now to share your screen so that you can also start the presentation. The presentation will be done in Spanish, so for those not understanding, it's just continue in the same through the same channel. It will be translated to English and French. Please, Grover, Orlando, the floor is yours.
Yes, a very good morning, good afternoon to everyone. This initiative that we're going to speak to you about is an initiative which currently is being implemented here in Bolivia. And it's also a product of a binational project between Peru and Bolivia. I want to share to you today, we've been working in strengthening interinstitutional governance mechanisms with local climate services. Very well. The project acknowledges that in our country, according to the Civil Defense Ministry
agricultural,
reports,
intercultural climate
the amount of
services
people affected by natural disasters is
Saya
increasing. We suffer droughts,
as the objective of
flooding,
increasing the
and
capacity
in
in
this sense,
risk
it has
reduction
been
and disaster response,
provoking,
and
it's
the
been
result,
causing
YATI,
institutions to
refers to the
mobilize
provision of
and also to
meteorological and
initiate
climate
projects
information to a
such
local
as
climate service
Pachayatina
that
Agricultural
improves
Intercultural
efficiency
Climate Service Support
of
Project
the
here in
different
Bolivia.
measures
Pachayatina
implemented.
means to know about the climate,
Share
to know about
some
the weather,
of
and we
the
focus
results
in
achieved
increasing
in
capacity in risk
climate
reduction, disaster
services.
response. And Yatina is a result. This is a word in the Aymara language, which means knowledge, and is related to the provision of meteorological and climate information through a local climate service, which exists in our country. That is how we have been able to, we have achieved that certain institutions, especially at municipality level, we have made certain agreements. And I want to tell you that currently this project, thanks to this cooperation effort and strengthening effort, we have been able to go from national to local level. We have implemented 7 agreements for early warning service. And here I'm presenting with Helvetas Bolivia. It's an institution that in the framework of an agreement with Senami has been contributing to the work of the municipal governments and through them with local actors such as mainly indigenous people,
La
Aymara
population des
people.
communes, selon les rapports de la protection civile, est affectée et lésée par les effets d'événements défavorables.
Oh, very well. we have identified certain needs. For example, an effective disaster risk management. In case in Bolivia, the National Service of Meteorology and Hydrology, CENAMI, is responsible for generating this information. However, municipal autonomous governments and rural residents have not been receiving specific information or data about their territory at local scale. Therefore, it's municipal governments, the ones who are strengthening the work and assisting in Tsunami's work through the data collection among the communities and contribute with economic and human resources. For example, through the municipal network of meteorological and hydrological stations, they assist in the expansion of a network of weather meteorological stations to generate further data. And this network is strengthened through local observers and is distributed in local areas, in specific areas. We also have municipal weather and climate promoters, which territorialize the tsunami's information and add local knowledge, such as the Pachayatiris, which is what we call the local observers in the Aymara language. And they use also natural indicators. So in these two, they try to forecast what extreme events could occur in future. And then this information is disseminated and provided to local stakeholders and municipalities, such as municipal agroclimatic schools, to be able to make a forecast at the agricultural level, and that they can be better prepared for any natural hazard events that could occur later on. And we also have a dissemination and alerts, which is related. It's linked to decision makers. So dissemination, it involves local communicators and it's also linked to the management units, which provide greater information regarding hazard events that could occur in the future. And we work closely with local governments in this matter. It's also important, as Orlando mentioned, to provide solution proposals from local to national level. If it's true that the Med Service already has that mandate to provide the information, but also thanks to this initiative, we've been managing to establish a bridge or a link at normative level, and with the resources that they have at local level, they can add to Tsunami's work. And with this work, the actors who have been identified, or the stakeholders, just Tsunami is a leader institution at national level. They have the competency, they have the authority to provide all the information regarding meteorology and climatology and hydrology in Bolivia. But in this case, the purpose is to cooperate, to add, and also to assist the municipal governments. It's also important to how the municipal autonomous governments, which in Bolivia are recognized as being subnational governments, how they can, from the normative that they can and the competencies that they have, to generate early warnings, and they can add to Tsunami's work. And it's also to provide data and vulnerability and threat, which assists the Tsunami and they contribute, as Orlando explained, to expand the network by financing and supporting the training of local climate promoters and observers, because through these local promoters, they are local people, they're young people, many of them are high school graduates who are being trained in regarding this information, and about hydrometeorology, climatology, and they can add to their with their local knowledge and local indicators. And it's quite interesting to count with this information from the farmers themselves that they obtain at local level. And also adding to Tsunami's work is to the signing of agreements, cooperation agreements with Tsunami, and to promote laws that can help to finance these type of initiatives. And the issue of sustainability is key, so the local governments can add to this work. And finally, our communities, as Andrea mentioned, this work from Aymara men and women who have that local knowledge and how they can read the weather and they can make forecasts. So the main work of these communities is to provide information on their vulnerabilities, the threats that they may be facing. We'll also see how this information can be incorporated into the early warning system of the municipalities and the reading of the natural indicators, which are very important to us to be able to incorporate them and integrate them under the framework of an intercultural dialogue. These are indicators of the Aymara people, how they look at plants and atmospheric variables, social cultural variables, which also add to the municipal early warning system. This work is very relevant and similar to an NGO, in this case, Helvetas. They provide technical and legal assistance or standardization assistance. And in this sense, they strengthen Tsunami's work. It's also important, the articulation and integration of the users of the climate services through our direct work directly with the users and with vulnerable people and families. They also have to be part of the solution and of the work at national and international level. Here in this slide, we want to show how the communities, with their local knowledge, link or work together with the municipal government and through the financing of a program, which here we call the 31,000 project, which finances, and with everything that my colleague Orlando mentioned, to achieve that this municipal early warning service can reach more people and to improve their understanding, because it's not always easy to understand what's a meteorological service data they can provide. So the municipal agroclimatic schools are spaces where they can learn more about all these issues, all this information, and the language employed. We also provide spaces for these climate promoters and also the support from the authorities so they can learn, they can receive the knowledge that they need. And sometimes the situation can be complicated, so the municipality begins to invest in installing meteorological stations and financing the local observers, and this helps in the sustainability at local level. And finally, we can see how to strengthen Tsunami, which it's a pilot project at national level. And we want more local and municipality governments to add. And within the processes of governance, as was indicated, Helvetas is one of the promoters, which promotes interaction and agreements between Tsunami with the local governments and the rural population to generate opportunities and reduce vulnerability through the creations of instances such as SMAT, with standards that support its creation with human and economic resources, in this case, to better inform the local population. Here we have identified 3 processes under the framework. in a municipal early warning system. And it's an objective process, a strategic process as well, to be able to provide information for the population and to link them directly with tsunami. And this information reaches farmers who work with agriculture directly with the local meteorological services. There are also risk reduction, municipal committees for risk reduction and disaster response. In this case, it's institution which takes decisions at municipal level, as well as the Municipal Emergency Operation Committee. This is entity which provides a planning in case of any natural disasters that could occur in the area. And finally, there are the farmers and the agricultural producer, which are involved in this objective process, which you can see in this graph. And the support process, in this case, it's divided in 4 areas. The first one would be in the legal area, such as municipal disaster risk management laws, through regulatory decrees. Secondly, the economic area, which is provided through the 310 financial program, which is recourses for DRR and ADE. Thirdly, municipal weather and climate promoters, the skills training that is provided, as well as local observers or pachayatiris, who are also upskilled. And finally, the physical aspect, which would be the meteorological and hydrological stations, which are installed in strategic points, in this case, in the municipality. And in the case of the laws, there it was created by Article 27 of the SMAT. It's a municipal executive decree under an intercultural approach, which must form and create the SMAT Municipal Early Warning Service with its components as a support body for tsunami, as the coordinator colleague mentioned, and in this case. And finally, the budget allocation article, which is also included under Article 16, where the executive has to assign almost 16% of the total municipal budget in the annual operational plan, and is principally assigned for disaster risk management. But we'll allocate 2%. In the case, these 2 articles are we can define what actions can be implemented to reduce or to mitigate risks. And in this way, we can show you the objectives that we have. As Orlando mentioned, those are the key pillars which allow for the sustainability of this initiative. So what have we learned in this time? For us, without having information at this scale, it would be very difficult to convince the authorities. That is why we understand that from presenting the evidence and presenting and the local generation this information, we finally were able to convince the authorities so that they, based on this evidence, they could take decisions, take action, and also allocate financing to generate more data and better quality data and information, and also take on action that can reduce and mitigate the impacts of climate change. And because meteorology has the tools that can be used by local men and women in the communities, and its information is completely managed. Previously, it was completely managed by scientists, but since this initiative, we have been able to show that at a certain level, in a local and organized level, many local and young people from the communities and the local schools, they can also be part of the solution. in the data collection. Us in the experience in our countries is the use of automatic networks is still not sustainable because there's no prior relationship process between the meteorological station, observers, and crops. So we are still looking for this. So how Senami can count on the support and so that the local people from the local communities they can gain experience and they can better understand what is the aim, what is the purpose of a modern weather station. Here you can view a local observer today. That day she registered a -11 temperature. What does that mean for a scientific researcher? What is the value for a statistical analysis? But what does this mean for our people? For us, this is what -11 degrees, how it affects their animals. For example, how many of them would die, would fall due to these weather conditions. It can be, this is an important way for them. We call it a threshold. And what happens in the agricultural sector here? We can see some potato varieties, which at this temperature value, they can be transformed. So as you can see, there's a relationship, a link, how to make a reading that can allow them to better understand how this information can assist them, and these forecasts can help them to take certain measures in the future. And finally, Senami needs further supports and initiatives to improve its work and to provide better information amongst the population. And as recommendations and all this work that has been carried out is basically it's necessary to strengthen the territorialization of the forecast under specific conventions, specifically in this case between the GAMSMATs or the local municipal governments and Senami. And also decision making. This much should be the main source in decision making. There are key instances for risk management and governance. Here you can see a photo of the mayor and the technicians from Tsunami, which define which could be the extreme weather event that could occur in the future, and to design or define which measures they could take on and how the municipality, the district could be affected. So there's a way how they plan certain actions in relation to the livestock and the agricultural sectors and for the people that are in that area. There is also a generation of guides and protocols for each component of the SMAT between GAM and the Senami, which will contribute to its sustainability. And these are also part of the initiative that assists in the strengthening. And SMAT should be included as an instrument of local and productive planning. In this case, it is not necessarily part due to an adverse situation, but it is a service in itself which could provide solutions and determined actions in the case of extreme weather events and disaster risk management in a municipality. So therefore, SMAT is one of them, is able to strengthen capacities and skills, build skills to better for disaster risk management. And in future, this could also be one of the initiatives which could further strengthen us at municipal level. Thank you very much, Johanna. That would be the end of our experience in the project with the Bolivian project and the Swiss cooperation. And we thank you for the opportunity.
Muchísimas gracias, Robert y Orlando. Very interesting to see how collaboration between municipalities and the National Hydromet Services can work. I can see that there are some questions in the chat for you.
Can Tsunami share the data of their stations in the neighboring countries, for example, for regional products? Or are there any restrictions regarding sharing that data? Yes, well, we are a project which is led by the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, Tsunami. But what we can share with you is that when you access Tsunami Bolivia's platform, you will find a link which contains all the information on the meteorological stations, and you can download it easily. You can find in the platform all the data, all the information that you may want to use.
Thank you very much for this question and the answer. Are there any other questions from the audience? Questions for Grover, for Orlando, but then also for the other two speakers.
There was a comment from Sergio pending, if he's still here.
Sergio, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you had an input for the first.
Well, yeah, because there was a question on how, on the interest on how did WMO started working with people in need, or meaning how can NGOs work with such an organization? And I just wanted to complement that a bit of the history of the project, and as Ilona mentioned. This collaboration with People in Need was financed by SDC. Well, People in Need was in Cambodia, and they started this project on early warning systems in some specific rivers and watersheds in Cambodia, and it had good success. It was taken by the National Committee on Disaster Management on the Ministry of Water Resources, and due of its success, when there came some possible financing for cruise for a project on Cambodia and Laos, it was promoted that it based on previous successes, including the work of People in Need and the EWS 1294 in Cambodia. So due to the fact that the cruise projects are implemented by only 3 implementing partners, which are WMO and UNDRR and the World Bank, or GFDR. So I think that I guess that's the way it came for WMO and People in Need to collaborate, and then it expanded to Laos, and there's also in Laos now the idea is to expand this system also with support from the Swiss Corporation, but also from cruise, and this under now the big umbrella of the Early Warnings for All initiative. So that was just to complement that. So perhaps it was kind of a bit of history of the project. So thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. Thanks for complimenting. Any other inputs or questions? If not, yeah, Mark, please, I can see your hand. You can.
Sorry,
If it's
I would
short
have a question.
We can take it.
Yeah. So it was mentioned that the data for Tsunami are publicly available. I would be interested to know, for example, from WMO, how they use such data at the national level in Bolivia in their global platform that provide data on climate projections, for example.
Thank you, Mark, for this very
Thanks.
pertinent question. Well, I think there was an exchange in chat that I explained, for example, in the climate information platform that we developed with the Green Climate Fund. Okay, the global scenarios, these are climate scenarios for the future for different time scale up to 2100. Basically, and these models are produced by SMHI, the Swedish Hydromet Services, which is one of the WMO global producing centers. Basically, they adjust the model scenarios, which is all kind of computed models for the non-technical kind of audiences. They kind of adjust the result, the model outputs, with the usually with the data that are sourced at the national level. So there is this sort of bias adjustment. But there is also another way that we use the data that are sourced nationally and locally. That we have another tool, again, that we developed with the help, actually we enhanced with the help of the Green Climate Fund, which is called Climpact. And this basically helps to generate the climate indices. This is different from the climate models, from the climate scenarios, because climate indices uses 100% the locally sourced observed data, so data from the MET stations. And they really help to really develop very, very context-specific high-resolution climate indices. And these, for example, they are very important for vulnerable sectors, for agriculture, for health, for energy. Because basically they give a sense of what could be the extreme events. I mean, first they give a picture of the past, so of the past trends, but also they help to understand the present and as well as the future. And the climate indices are very important when you have this kind of needs of a high resolution information, for example, for projects on climate services or early warning system. You need to develop, for example, drought indices, heat waves indices, indices that tell you about the extreme precipitations. So, and basically all the sourced observed data, locally sourced, they are all used especially for these indices, and these are calculated through Climpact, through this tool that is usually promoted by WMO. With the expert network. So these are two ways that we use this national resource data for to refine global models as well as to produce more high, spatially and temporally high resolution data for project purposes. And this is why also WMO really kind of push for a free circulation of data and are restricted among countries, among projects, and among institutions, wherever possible, of course, where this does not endanger any national kind of security issue or matter. Thank you for your question.
And thank you, Ilaria, for answering it. Unfortunately, the session is already coming to an end. We have to close very soon. Nevertheless, I would like to very shortly hand over to my colleague Omar, who may have a few sentences to close the session.
Thanks, Johanna. Yes, I will try. I think it was a very nice session, as the title said, from global to national, and so actually we went to local level, and we saw how all these frameworks and partnerships come in together. And so I think we saw very nicely from the WMO how many new dynamics exist on frameworks. Also, new opportunities exist for partnering with the WMO through the National Hydrometeorological Services. And Andrea gave one example of this, so of an implementation of strengthening the National Hydrometeorological Services. And this was an example of a direct implementation of the WMO, as Ilaria mentioned. And so this is also, again, another entry point, I think, for NGOs seeking the National Hydrometeorological Services in their countries. And I think we saw also nicely from Andrea the importance of socioeconomic benefit studies, how this makes the policy case to strengthen these agencies, and how this requires so much information from the users to define really what the impact is, what the value is. And I think finally this contribution from Helvetas Bolivia really complemented this overall view of bringing how to bring in this local knowledge, this local language. So the question also about the indigenous knowledge, and this Yatinya was an example, but also how the municipalities have to come into that this is not an automatic process. Just delivering the information at the national level does not ensure yet that, for instance, warning reach the end users. And so overall, I think it's a great example how important the partnership is between all the actors in this area, and in order to tackle upon these different levels of the value cycle. So it's something I think we have to embrace, and there seem to be many opportunities. So I think I would leave it here, and also thank you from my side.
Thank you, Omar, for this wrap up and excellent summary. With this, I would like to close the session. Again, mention just very shortly that there are a few sessions left. there is one on academia just in half an hour, and then another 2 sessions tomorrow morning. With that, I would like to say thank you to my colleagues supporting this session, and then especially thank you to the speakers, Ilaria, Andrea, Orlando, and Grover. Thank you very much for your interesting presentations. And also thank you very much to the translators, also for your flexibility to change between languages. Thanks to all of you, and I hope to see you soon in another session.